Freedom is a trap. It's an illusion. It's almost always a lie. But it doesn't have to be. And in fact, I think the only things that are genuine and true are the things that you have the freedom to choose. It might be a little weird to think about it this way, but freedom is one of the most common themes in storytelling, and anime especially is obsessed with it. I would argue that it's up there with the power of friendship and the power of love for most common themes in anime, despite being much less noticeable and talked about. That said, I think freedom is by far the most complex and interesting of them. Because in a way, love and friendship are all reliant on freedom. If someone is forced to spend time with you, can you really call them your friend? And if someone loves you because you're their only option, is that really love? You see, it all relies on freedom. But if that's the case, why did I say it was a trap? Well, I think Eren Yeager is the perfect example. Eren worships the very idea of freedom, and he's one of the few characters in the story that understands the value of free will. So much so that he thinks everyone around him is a slave because they don't have autonomy over a majority of their life. And in a sense, he's right. In the beginning especially. They're forced behind the walls, and when the Titans invade, all they can do is accept the casualties and retreat into a smaller living space. As he says, they truly do live like cattle. But as much as Eren is correct about the world around him, he's completely wrong about himself. And that's where the trap of freedom comes into play. Every action and decision that Eren makes is in the pursuit of freedom, which consequently and completely controls him. He pretends that he's the only person in the world who is truly free, but in reality, there is nobody more confined than him. Because Eren isn't following his own idea or sense of freedom. He's blindly following a vision that he admits he has no control over and barely even understands. If you want to imagine everyone in AOT as sheep in a crowded pen, then you can think of Eren as the farmer's puppet. He has practically no free will, because he sacrificed his very self, his essence, for the pursuit of freedom, which is inherently the least free thing a person could do. It's a perfect paradox. To attain freedom, he decides to completely give up his own, which of course is never going to work, at least not in the way that he wants. But Eren can't think of any better solution, so he becomes trapped between his ultimate desire for freedom and his failure to attain it in his own way. This causes him to make a grave mistake, which is relying on somebody else's vision of freedom to attain his own. This plan is obviously doomed to fail, because you can't attain freedom by living as a slave to someone else's ideas. But Eren is so hopeless that he does, causing him to give up any semblance of freedom he had or had the potential to attain, all in the twisted name of freedom itself. And that's exactly why it's a trap. It's an impossibly thin line to walk, staying perfectly in between the pursuit of freedom while not becoming a slave to the very idea. However, what if someone had the power that Eren didn't? He clearly had the resolve, just not the capabilities. So surely if a person or a character had the means to attain freedom, then it would be simple and straightforward, right? Well, no, it's actually the complete opposite, which is why I said freedom is often a lie and illusion rather than just a trap. And there is no character in anime who better proves this point than the honored one, Satoru Gojo. Now, Gojo has everything that Eren didn't. He has the power to change the world at the snap of his fingers. He has the ability to make just about any threat disappear. So you would think he embodies freedom. But in reality, he's just as hopeless as Eren. Because even though he hypothetically has the ability to do everything, he ends up not being able to do anything. Now, I will grant Gojo isn't useless. He kills Toji and Haname, and most importantly trains his students. But he doesn't have half the impact a character of his caliber deserves. Something always prevents him from impacting the story. He either arrives too late, gets sealed away, or is just unserious, which allows the enemy to live another day. In the end, Gojo gets pulled in every direction, because everyone needs him in one way or another. But there just isn't enough of him, so he's constantly running around on a wild goose chase. that never really changes anything or even achieves his own goals. For example, when Geto tries to take over Jujutsu High, Gojo is out on a mission. When Sukuna takes over Yuji's body, Gojo is sealed away. Something is always distracting Gojo and preventing him from being free and doing what he should. And you can call this bad writing, that it's just a symptom of Gege making Gojo too overpowered. And while that might be true to some degree, I still think it showcases the illusion of freedom, because it proves freedom isn't something that can be bought with money, power, or authority. It's something much more difficult to attain. So difficult that even Gojo, a man with unparalleled strength, can't attain it. And I think that's why it's such a good theme in anime, because the pursuit of freedom is deeper than just getting stronger or wanting it more. It requires real growth and change. But it's very hard to make a character that is flexible enough to keep up with the pace of freedom while still making them an entertaining and complex character. Which is why I think that one of the best representations of true freedom is Thorfinn. Thorfinn is someone who, like Eren, was a slave to an idea. While Eren was a slave to freedom, Thorfinn was a slave to revenge. During the years he worked under Askeladd, Thorfinn was a husk of a person. He had no autonomy of his own. He was doing what he thought he was meant to do, even though it didn't bring him a sliver of joy or fulfillment, along with preventing him from becoming the kind of person his father would have wanted. That is, until Askeladd dies, and everything changes for Thorfinn. It takes him a lot of time and growth, but eventually he does become free. He's free from the anger that consumed him. He's free from the violence that was his way of life. But how does he just become free, while Eren and Gojo can't? The reason is change. Eren and Gojo are both comparatively static characters. They have their goals and philosophies and rigidly stick to them, which acts as an excuse for them to cling to the past and disregard their present. So in a way, they become disingenuous to themselves. It has nothing to do with dire situations or having enough power. It's all about continual change. Because if a character is unable to change, their mind is destined to move on while their life does not. And this is exactly what happens when characters like Gojo and Eren fall into the trap of freedom. They become loyal to outside duties or ideas more than their own self, causing them to remain stuck and be unable to change in the ways that freedom requires. However, as I said, Thorfinn is the solution to this dilemma, because he does change. He accepts the hardship and uneasiness that comes with becoming a new person. And most importantly, he sacrifices the person that he used to be in order to chase what he wants. And I think that's why he's one of the best representations of freedom in all of anime. Because Thorfinn isn't free thanks to his skill in combat or because of his circumstances. You could even put him in a jail cell or force him to work on a farm and he'd still be more free than Eren ever was. It shows freedom is something that is entirely up to you. You could have nothing and be totally free, or have everything like Gojo and still be no more than a slave. And even though the cost of freedom is to sacrifice who you used to be, the reward of it is priceless. Because it's only once you're free that you can find things that are worth changing for. And we see that in Thorfinn, as he finds a new goal, one that's filled with purpose and fulfillment. One that's the exact opposite of what he was chasing in the past. And this is how Vinland Saga overcomes anime's freedom paradox, or the freedom lie. Because Thorfinn doesn't worship freedom. He doesn't become a slave to it. He just keeps moving and evolving with life. You could say that he just rides the wave rather than swimming against it or sinking under. Meaning, he changes in whichever way is necessary for his own fulfillment. If he must act as a king, he'll act as a king. If he must act as a peasant, then peasant he is. And because of that, he becomes a better man, a happier person, and someone who is truly free.